Hello, and welcome to GATSBY Fridays, a show about getting the best out of a creative life from two creative directors working around the world and based in New York City.
I'm your host, Alex Jamilio.
And I'm Sarah Semi.
Today, we talk about how GATSBY Fridays started and how it's going.
Like superheroes, we discuss its origin story. Unlike superheroes, we'll talk about the challenges we face and where we go from here.
And at the end of each episode, we make a signature cocktail to toast cheers to you.
So hang with us as we talk how it started, how it's going.
I'm Alex.
And I'm Sarah.
And this is GATSBY Fridays. Sarah, before we start our conversation, let's do a check-in. How are you? And what are you wearing? I like what you're wearing, by the way.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I am wearing leggings I bought specifically to look more proper, as if I wasn't wearing leggings. Carbon 38, leatherette, high-waisted. They have all these seams that make it look more like,
They look like jeans, like leather moto pants.
Exactly. That's the whole point. But at the end of the day, they're just yoga pants. Does that look better? So, welcome to my winter uniform. This might come up before the end of the season again, because this is exactly why I bought them for. And I have a cropped pink sweater.
Did you get multiples?
No, I only bought one because it didn't come in other colors. I also like, black leather is like, what
what would
other
be a great
colors?
color? Like a copper. Would be really cool.
Yeah, not me. I'm sure it looks great on someone else.
Oh, copper is a cool color.
But then all of a sudden you walk into disco land. It's already reflective. It's black. If you put the copper in it, then all of a sudden we're on stage. And, we're trying to be like on the border of stage with this one. We're looking to be... It's a conscious decision that I'm wearing leggings, but they are leggings.
Okay.
The comfort is there, but the appearance is on the border of being more
Let's
than that.
not get it twisted. Comfort.
And the sweater it's like a baby, almost like a, if you can get Pepto Pink on a wool sweater, that's what I got.
It's cool.
It's cropped. It's bulky, but it's like super cropped. So it's me making, it's trying to make me feel
cozy.
skinnier than I am, but it's also super warm.
Cozy and warm.
Oh my God.
It's a good look.
What are you wearing and how are you feeling?
So we are both wearing chunky sweaters. Mine is just a black kind of fisherman type of sweater in black. And, wash jeans. And I am not wearing my signature Jordans. I'm wearing some Nike Cross trainers. But I am wearing, because it's GATSBY Fridays, I am wearing my Smith shirt.
Oh.
It's a head full of hollow. And the reason why I'm wearing this one is because I love the Smiths, even though Morrissey is a polarizing figure.
Are you trying to sneak your rock band t-shirt Fridays into GATSBY Fridays now?
Always, because it's Friday. Because it's Fridays that these drop. So I figured, let me just wear... Also, I own a lot of band t-shirts.
I know.
So I just have to wear them as regular
t-shirts. As a side note, Alex had this band t-shirt Friday Instagram post for the last couple of years with his coworkers.
Yes.
So that's just me taking a stab and saying, are you trying to sneak that in here?
I wish I should do that more. I miss that. I miss that time.
No one's in the offices anymore.
No, so there's no reason for me to be... I can take pictures on my own. I don't care.
All right. Okay. Band t-shirt Fridays, everyone. Alex, we're halfway through our second season.
Yes.
And I think we are finally ready to talk about this podcast project we're tackling and the behind the scenes and how it came about and where we're going with it, which is why we are rocking on this meme that's been going around, how it started, how it's going, because we definitely have the gold mine for that and how it started and how it's going.
You should definitely put that meme, by the way, on our site so people can see what we mean.
Oh, there's so many that, and my favorite's going to be the one with Obama and Oprah, just to get you started.
That's a good one.
There's a lot of them out there. I'll put a collection out onto our Instagram. We have started a long time ago before we started doing a podcast. This is not our first time talking about important subjects that we value in terms of career or art or creativity or even social justice or where we fit in the world. It's never been about political alliances. It's more about who you and I are, has always been.
And we started this conversation a long time ago.
Very long time ago.
Yes.
And yes, we have started, as we've joked along the way, that we started over boozy brunches in Soho. But at the end of the day, we didn't just, we didn't just drink and hang out. We were talking about what the movies that we saw meant. All of that has led us here today.
Exactly.
So, coming back to this meme of how it started, how it's going, I really thought that this is a very appropriate way to talk about this project, because this has been a lot of work, a huge undertaking for us, both of us, considering that we're just doing this because we believe in it so much.
It's our passion project.
Exactly. Go back to the episode before this.
Yes, and
we talk about a passion project.
Learn all about passion projects. So, Sarah, let's bring us back about, what do you say, a year ago, maybe about 10 months ago. It was still warm because it was summer last year.
My whole life that I've known you, you said you should have your own TV show, and I said we should have our own TV show. That's usually just been the joke, that we just joke around about things. But the joke has never been light. It's always been about the things that we paid attention to, about culture, about movies, about society. It's certain things that we noticed. It was never just light jokes. But about a year ago, last summer, we attended that workshop together that we'd been waiting for a very long time.
We were in Brooklyn.
And you said, I gotta run early because I'm meeting this photographer for my passion project.
Yes.
And the workshop was supposed to end around 2 p.m. So by the time you made plans with the photographer, would have been perfectly fine. But the free flow of things to come, like when you show up to these things, I had no other plans. I brought my dog with me, which means that I'm free to stay as long as the dog is, there's no reason for me to go anywhere else. And the workshop ended up being more of a sidewalk conversation at the cafe
where we were. And then we went on to...
And the conversation kept on going, and you were like, well, I gotta go. And I was like, I want to stay. So I stayed, you left, and met the photographer.
We were talking about earlier, the episode just before this one was about passion projects, and one of the things about the lecture, the
workshop we
went to that day was about kind of kicking all that into gear. And I decided, yes, this all rings true. We should kick this into gear. One of the biggest things I think is a hurdle is asking for help.
Yes.
And my reluctance, and this I'm just speaking for myself, is that I have a difficult time asking for help.
So do I.
And
I feel you.
The workshop that we went to kind of teased all that out to kind of say that it was okay to really ask for help, to ask for guidance, and to ask for the things that you really want out of life. And I really wanted to jumpstart a passion project that I had in mind. And I had to ask somebody to do a little bit of work for me. And so I met up with a photographer. We all met up and we had dinner that day.
Well, what I want to say is you made that commitment to the photographer.
Yes.
And we both made the commitment to the workshop, but the workshop was supposed to end at 2 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
I happened to have the freedom to linger on, and you left. So for me, I came from the outside to that interaction that you were having with the photographer. He was already a friend of yours through your family, but from the outside, I stayed and hung out with the people who wanted to hang out with, the person who held the workshop, and the other. I mean, for me, at that point, I was like, well, I'll meet you. I just still felt like... But I really appreciate that you knew that your project needed you to meet the photographer. I always appreciate someone who can say, well, I love how this can lag on till the end of time, but I need to be somewhere else.
Yes.
And to be able to say that takes a lot of guts and takes a lot of... It isn't a disrespect to the situation, which... So after all of this inspirational workshop that we both attended, you go meet your photographer, and then I come up meet you with you guys at that Brooklyn show about street art.
Yes, that was a good show.
That was really
impressive.
Amazing,
actually.
Like having parts of graffiti involved in there. There was a lot of like 2-dimensional art that felt like 3-dimensional. There was like the cardboard that felt like full on with sound effects. I have so much photography. I took so many pictures of us that day. But coming from the high of this workshop that we're already ready to go, and then we meet the photographer. I didn't even know who he was. He's a friend of yours who had happened to end up taking our season 2 cover photography for us.
Yes.
He's incredibly talented. We ended up going, from the gallery show to just grab dinner because it was time for that.
In the neighborhood
in Brooklyn. But the beauty of it is the night that we have always known the conversation that we always have has been nerdy enough to be, but having an audience of one that is cozy enough, that's personal enough to just all of a sudden spin into saying, you guys, this conversation is just amazing. Because there was a moment where I was venting about my girlfriend and me getting into it, and the way that you came in, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, how you said, let me tell you my perspective on that. And all of a sudden I was like, yeah, that's true. And we just came out of it, and all of a sudden we were having this conversation about how we do need to face each other in life and how we get past it by trying to be better.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you change the narrative is what you told me. And you and I just, in our usual drunk stupor, we just talking off. We've already been talking all day long about, from through the exercise. And what just happened here? What did you just guys do? You said something, he said something back, and you said, oh, well, that's really inspiring. Thank you so much. And this doesn't happen. What is this?
Yes.
I remember his reaction. So on the way back, we all took a car together back to Columbus Circle. And I remember on the car, and I was planning the podcast.
Basically, that is the impetus. Impetus?
I don't know. I think we already had it there.
It's always been there.
It's always been there. We sit down and talk about nerdy things, and nothing is just as hey, what's up? Have you seen the last Kardashians? It's never been our conversation. We're not talking about, I don't know, we're not talking about the headlines of USA Today.
Have you seen the last Kardashians?
We talk about the movies that we've seen, how it impacts how you view life. So all of this has been cooking for decades from our conversations, how we want to talk about the things that we've been cooking together. I don't think we took it together to have a project together, but I think that has cemented what this podcast became about.
Do you think it was that time that was the start, the nucleus of the idea? Because I feel it was further into the past than that. And then what solidified it was really us sitting down and just really brainstorming.
We have always had the potential. You have always joked about, you should have your TV show, and I said, you should have your TV show. That was always a joke, but it was never a serious conversation. For me, the first time I felt because I was going through this phase in my life where I was I need to make meaning out of the work that I do. Part of why we went to the workshop, Tell Me About Yourself. The entire challenge of the workshop was tell me about yourself. And we sit there, and everybody in that room, it's 12, 14 people, was new to each other. And you and I have known each other for, 18 years? And we talk about the one experience that really changed you or impacted you. And you talk about a Lenny Kravitz concert, and I talk about my trip to Oaxaca. And we both look at each other and be like, I've known you my whole life, and I never heard about this.
Yes.
And everyone's looking at us, you've known each other your whole lives? And we're because we're the only ones that in that entire workshop that have actually had the history of saying, this is why this workshop works. This is why Holly is that amazing. Because she poses the questions and in her own words, creating these uncomfortable pockets for us to really respond to.
Yes.
We come out of that. It's happenstance that all of a sudden We took the workshop for our individual explorations of where we want to go in our careers or in our creative lives or whatever it was. It wasn't this defined that somehow cemented us. And at the end of that conversation, be like, we've known each other for this long and I'm still learning things about you. There's so much to dig up here.
And so what we wanted to do was kind of filter that into something that we can start talking about on a more general level.
Yes, because we also are creatives. We've been talking about challenges. What I mean is like life throws shit at you. Life throws things at you that you do not see coming. I did not think that I was going to have to figure out how to pay workers' comp insurance and fill out audits once a year, which is like like I did that this week, and it gives me so much anxiety. And I call them, and they're so kind on the phone, but it drives me. It's my nightmare. So all of these things that we end up doing, this is not, you don't plan out, but you can kind of, if we're proactive about how we want to go about our lives. So we're always talking about the movies. We were always talking about things in the bigger scheme. When I watched Queen Sugar and I found out who Eva DuVernay was, I wanted you to see that show. It's a very specific story. I like individual stories. It might be too soapy for someone else. The storyline doesn't matter. The way that the beauty of the landscape of Louisiana is pictured, let alone the racial cultures and all this stuff. And clearly we have a lot to say about all those hot topics as well. We talk about these when we meet random lunch spots around New York City. This is what we talk about. So that conversation has value to more than just you and me.
Yes. I was gonna interject that these conversations that we have, they are beyond us. And they are beyond what we talk about, because we kind of take into fact the larger society as a whole and take all that in, process that, and we really interrogate that.
And I think that night in Brooklyn, what triggered the conversation was I was just really venting, and you told me a story about you and your family relationships and said, this is how I changed the narrative. And those two words, changing narrative, I'm still living by those two words today. I mentioned in previous episodes, but the interaction that it was almost therapeutic. You have a kind way of saying that feedback. There was this moment that's usually has been our interaction. You never say, "Oh my God, stop venting."
Well, you were receptive.
I'm only receptive because you never snap at me. That's the dynamic that makes this conversation, that's the dynamic that makes this podcast work, because we are very strong individuals that have our own issues that we are also forcing each other to face. And I think that's the first moment of truth where someone else outside said, "Oh my God, what just happened here? You called her out. She said, 'Oh, you're right.' And then you just guys went about, like, he's like, 'What just happened here?'" And I remember that very clearly, because that was the moment where I said, this is why this is worthy of a conversation. That's how we started. So we're going to come back to how we're going to keep going now. So after that night in Brooklyn, it took about us a year to make the decision to well, it took a pandemic and quarantine for us to say, okay, maybe now we can do this podcast. The material has always been there. The conversation has always been there, but we pulled the trigger through that. Get us there.
So how it's going. Backtracking, we were sitting down, we were trying to figure out how to actually do this. Now, when we talk about how we were going to put the podcast together, we were actually talking about the bones of what it was going to be, how the format was going to be, what we were going to talk about. All this was during the height of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Just before the quarantine
ended. And when I mean quarantine ended, I mean like that's when we were barely allowed to be on publicly.
Yes. As a matter of fact, you were probably the first person.
You were the first person I
saw. Fair.
Out of the 4 months of the quarantine, that was my only human interaction until I actually came out and saw you in Bryant Park.
So we went to Bryant Park.
Crazy demonstrations in New York where
a lot of protests.
All of the protests were happening.
So we sat at Bryant Park. We started hashing this out. We started just kind of scribbling things on paper, and we thought to ourselves, this is becoming a serious endeavor. How should we do this? What should we talk about? What's the format going to be? What's your recollection?
I remember walking because I was like, well, I'm not ready to go on a train. I'm going to walk down to Bryant Park. It's walkable distance from where I live right now. It wasn't like this peaceful moment where like I showed up in your office and we just like penned it out how this is all going to happen. But I feel like because it's been cooking for literally since the first day we met, I feel like this is like the first season was like the first album, right? They've been living in those emotions for 15 years. They had so much to say in one album. But then you finish that and you go into the second one, you're like, what? I think knowing all of this about rock history, we both decided that we want to take a break after the first season.
Yes.
But starting it, everything was ready to burst already. We were sitting there in Bryant Park over our Starbucks weird, tea concoctions, and we sound tested things. We were looking to buying mics. We hadn't bought anything yet, but I think that conversation, again, for me, like looking back on it, maybe it wasn't as significant at the moment, but I think it's ironic that the first person I saw after the quarantine was you, talking about the state of affairs and all of the nerdy things that we get into. But the last person I saw before I did not leave my apartment for 4 months was also you in Bryant Park.
Yes.
Because we had this routine where when your Friday was available, you would just text me and I'd come down for lunch because I work from home or my office used to be in Columbus Circle. So I could just I work for myself. So I had the freedom of saying, okay, you tell me when and I just take the train down. We walked around.
Amazing.
For like an hour, ended up at Taco Bell of all places. I have a picture. It looks glorious. It was like I hadn't had Taco Bell in years.
It was a new
we
Taco
had this
Bell.
lunch and we're like talking about this looming disaster that's coming over us. And it's like a sunny, bright day in Bryant Park. And I remember saying, listen, like I keep thinking about like when we're in this Bryant Park space and we see the big library building to our right, I really have a straight up flashback to 12 Monkeys, where that scene in the beginning where in Philadelphia where like all the creatures are like, like the free wildlife is coming to life. It's a snowy moment and it's like this government building. It is not Bryant Park, New York's library, but it has a similar feeling of like, big government building, big space area, and we're like sitting there eating our Taco Bell, and I'm like, we are going into quarantine after this. It was the last social thing I had. And what do? We nerd about 12 Monkeys and dystopic futures. Yes. That's what we do. That's why this is a podcast. So we went into the quarantine at this like really nerdy conversation and then came out of it literally together at the same location in Bryant Park, testing how we record on a phone without a microphone, looking into what to buy. I think, well, you said, like, buying the microphone was the decision-making point.
I feel like the microphone, for a podcast is the biggest thing. Audio is important, obviously. And I felt like that was the stepping stone that really put us over the threshold to say, oh, my God, we got to take this serious. Because, first of all, microphones are expensive. They're not cheap. And that was the first thing that we really said to ourselves, this is going to be our major investment. That means we're all in.
Yeah. We both bought mics.
And then the second part was the hosting platform. Now, you could speak more on that
than the hosting
I
platform.
can.
I mean, you Google podcast hosting platforms, a whole million things come out. You read the reviews.
All different levels, pay grades.
The irony and serendipity of things is I am a single woman in New York City dating online. And I matched with a man who happened to be a sound engineer at the time. Literally the week of us making the decision on what platform to go.
To host.
And, you make small talk on these dating platforms to just kind of talk about what you're trying to do. Like if I have a project coming up, what else am I going to talk about? I talk about the project I have going on, and I see in his profession, and he's a sound engineer, and he goes like, well, I know this and that, and I'm like, listen, we are creatives, but we're visuals. We have no clue what we're doing with the sound platform. We're just getting into this. Like, we're so excited. And then he goes, you should try Anchor. And I swear to you, in all of the Google searches that we tried, Anchor never showed up.
No.
Do you remember it? I don't.
No, there's plenty of other platforms.
And there's a lot of happenstance in how this project kind of aligned itself with what we're doing. Is I was renting this office space at a co-working place uptown for 2 years. Right before the quarantine, I was like, listen, I want to start coming downtown more. I need to change the circumstances. I need to change the environment that I am creative about. And I found this artist studio where there's 4 artists, very old school, New York place.
It was very cool.
It was super cool.
It was very cool. Very
High
New
ceilings,
York.
very old ceiling, like very old New York, but like old ceilings and fire escape and everything. And then the type of place maybe you could find so easily all around 10 years ago, but it is one of the last standing places in the city. Like, to find a place like that, you have to go to Brooklyn now. I'm like, I appreciated the fact that it only brought me down to the Lower East Side, which was amazing. But my rent kicked in March 1st, and then we went into quarantine March 7th. So, like, I literally, paid rent for that space for 3 months, and I was like, I justified it by saying that it is going to create a more social interaction with more creative people that I surround myself with. Well, I was still working from home, so I decided to stop that, but we needed a place to record, and I went back to, like, what's out there other than what I already had. And we found this place, The Farm in Soho. This place has been around for a decade. It's nothing new. I just never, I don't know, like, it just never lined up the same way. And all of a sudden, there's a foam padded recording room of the workspace that I get to rent.
Amazing. So we have...
What are the odds?
Yes. So we had an actual recording room, which is pretty cool.
It's tight.
Yes.
It is super tight. In the summer, it's super hot. But at the end of the day, if we stayed in the fancy art studio in the Lower East Side with all the art space, it was high ceilings, it echoed off the microphones and all of that. So the way that things line up, right? Like, we get recommended Anchor, we find this workspace that we're freely allowed to come in, the entire team, without any extra issues, which I've been renting spaces from co-working companies for the last 6 years, and this is the first time that I actually feel like they are just happy to have me here and enable the work that we want to do instead of getting in the way of it for sake of their profits.
But more importantly, I feel like I don't want to interject the metaphysical, but I feel like things line up for a reason, and things happen for a reason in one's life. And I feel like for us to go on this journey together and get all these charms or whatever have you in the way of us putting this together is amazing. I mean,
those are just cherries on top.
Yes, and that's incredible, because here we are, we're putting an idea, a concept forward that we believe in, and the universe is bending its energy towards us. I know that sounds weird. I don't want to even start to be that person.
Listen.
But I feel like the universe is bending us towards this direction, and we're talking about how it started and how it's going. This is how it's going.
I think, that's how it started. When we were starting out, we needed all these, I know it might sound random, but all these random signs supported the feeling that we are in the right physical space. We were ready to do this. The work was already bubbling up to explode. We just needed the place and the platform and the physical space to outlet it. And we found that very easily because we said, okay, we are ready to put it out. And it all kind of lined up.
So what do you think?
But that doesn't mean that we didn't work hard or we just waited around for it to line up for us.
Of course not. I
think the message is that when you really do work, things will go wrong and things will go right, and the things that go right you will cherish a lot more deeply, like the way that we're doing right now.
What I wanted to ask is the challenges that we faced. What do you think were some of the direct challenges? Sound.
Well, you and I were both visual creators.
Yes.
Sound editing?
Not my forte.
Not my forte either. You took that on, and I really appreciate that.
Once again, not my forte.
Well, we both did the research. We looked into the platforms, but I was like, oh my God. Like, when you go into sound, there's like channels and stuff. I still don't know. I don't want to. But here's the thing, I don't want to know. Like, right? There's a difference of like, I just need the sound to sound good enough without me getting too nerdy, detailed into it. I have so much respect for sound engineers.
You remember the picture that I sent you the first time I tried to edit our very first episode? So I send you a picture of me trying to edit the episode, and you text me, so how's it going? and it's a picture of smashed headphones.
Oh no, that's on the second episode when you were like, we were trying to catch I was in Rhinebeck and I barely had any internet. And I was like,
my goodness.
Oh my God, that was the second episode. The first one, we were trying to figure.
We were just trying to figure out the sound, how to just get the sound up, and
right?
I was losing my damn mind trying to figure this out.
Yes. I just need to know enough basics to put it out. So when I need to get into a really high-end editing software and there's channels and stuff, I don't care about the channels. I just need to sound good. I just need it to sound like it's a professional
That's
software.
a challenge that we had to figure out, and
like,
we're still working on that.
I mean, yes. So even the sound of like the jingles that come in through the episode, like thankfully Anchor provides them and we're very happy with that. But now we're at the place where we want something more unique to
more
the
bespoke.
Spirit of more bespoke to the spirit of GATSBY Fridays. It's so much work already that we're like, okay, let's just keep it going consistent for until the end of the season. There's all these things that you always want to do more, but like the sound editing and finding advice out there on like there's a lot of blogs and stuff that I'm very good at like participating in to get information out. But oh my God, the problem is that we're not sound engineers. We don't want to be. From the other side, the subject matter was always there, but we already had like we talked about, like the conversations was always there for us to kind of form it into a proper podcast. But that required two aspects. There needed to be art and there needed to be writing. And you took on the writing because you said you wanted to write.
And you took on the art, which I am grateful for, because I think your aesthetic and your eye. Also, we know each other.
Yeah.
So before any of that, we know each other and we know what our capabilities of, and I knew that you could handle the art. Also, you came with a very, very strong perspective and idea of what you thought that the art for GATSBY Fridays should be, which is amazing because here we are, we're talking about a concept that's kind of really in the air, and you made it reality, which is incredible because you put a visual to our conversations, which is
but also, amazing. You didn't fundamentally challenge it either. I think we've talked about partnerships in past episodes, mm-hmm. where the reason that this interaction works is that when you have an opposing perspective, I don't feel threatened or I don't just counteract it out of gut. I listen to you, and there's a respect that I say, this is what GATSBY should look like in 2020. And you say, okay, let's go for it. You don't really discourage me because it wasn't your idea. There's a lot of in creative partnerships, there's this expectation that the ego comes in the way. We have somehow magically never had that problem. I have so much respect, and that doesn't mean that we didn't argue in terms of what we want to do in certain things. Like, I really hate how branded channels look when you put 7 different logos of Spotify, Apple, and Amazon all on the same page, and you were like, well, when you don't use their own branding and you just distill it to gray, they disappear. We need to show that we are on all those platforms. Like, there was a really valuable conversation, and at times when I was working in media that I fought. It's not the first time I fought that argument. But this is the first time I said, okay, I will heed and I will listen. There's a level of respect that we have for each other in terms of how this should flourish. Somehow this botanical view was always cooking in my mind. We talked about side projects, we talked about personal interests in the past episodes. This is nothing new in that aspect, but there's a level of personal attachment that I have to lush greenery that I have been collecting graphic images of for past couple of years. It's nothing new. It was cooking art. They're already irrelevant to this conversation.
And it lends itself well to the aesthetic of what you wanted this to be. I mean, look.
But at the
maybe
same time,
my slight bias is because I think it looks beautiful because it's our branding.
Yeah. But if you didn't, you would have told me.
Yes, and that's the point. I feel like that's the thing. Like, we have the symbiotic relationship where we can really call each other out if things are not even the way we personally think it should be, if it's just not brand appropriate. And so far,
I really am sometimes amazed at the dynamic that we have, is because you're not my first creative interaction or project colleague. We've known each other for a very long time. We've been friends, but being friends and putting a project together, it's like mixing money and friends kind of conversation. As soon as things get serious, it changes things. Your commitment to it, the way that you respect each other's time, all of that, we're just discovering now. So part of the challenge has been, yes, I came up with this idea. You happen to love it, but there has been occasions where like, well, I don't know. I don't love that. In the second season, you have driven a lot of my selection for the cover photo shoot, which I ask because I want that feedback from you. I don't want to be the one that's completely making all the decisions. But there was early on in the first season, our first picture selection, and I found this one very Art Deco looking picture which did not have a handle. And you're like, it doesn't have a handle. And I was like, listen. It's late on a Thursday night. This needs to go live tomorrow morning. It looks Art Deco. It's a picture. It's going. I understand it doesn't have a handle, but you know what? That's not the battle to fight right now. I hear you, but I'm going with it. But you don't always also say, how dare you? Like, I hear you. I understand what you have a problem with, but it's good enough. Because within the time, like, because, you know, making these design decisions is always, it's not about just what always perfectly looks right, but it's also, is it the right decision within the given time frame? Because is the picture of a picture worth pushing the live time? Like, it wasn't for that particular situation, but then there's other incidents where you're like, well, you know, like, I picked this one shot, and you're like, it's too serious for this subject. And I'm like, but I like this shot. And you're like, no, that's not the right one. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll go pick another one. There's the conversation is, I think the most important thing is we respect each other. When I say the picture's going, you don't say, how dare you? The same way that when I say, really, not this shot? And you say, no, I don't go, well, it's my decision. I think the level of respect that we have in each other's creative vision is why we have been able to do so many episodes so far.
And it's the same thing. I know you cite me as being the one that's writing the episodes, but we honestly write the episodes together. I mean, the reason why, even though it doesn't seem like it's scripted, and for the most part it's not, we kind of have a general understanding of what the theme of an episode is going to be. And we parcel out that theme into 3 sections, and then we go on into those 3 sections and answer those questions within those sections. You
define that outline.
Yes.
The same way I define the overall look, you define the outline of how we should approach this conversation. You're the one that decided we should have a check-in and the end cocktail. All of these were your writing creative.
And we both go in and fill all those aspects out. I mean, it's not, you know, I'm glad I have you as a partner to work on the cocktails.
You gotta love the drinking for the cocktail creation.
Because it's wonderful. It's a great aspect of what the format of the show is, but we really both dig into what it is that we want to say about the episode and what the cocktail needs to say about the episode, as well as, you know, the check-in is something that we both, I feel like,
I've grown to like it as much as I despise it.
I like it because it really just gives us kind of a base level on how we're feeling for that day and go into the episode kind of with a clean slate.
that, and also puts a timestamp on whatever the subject we're talking about. Not every subject we discuss is historically relevant for that moment. So, like, for example, our first cultural legacy episode, the Ruth Bader Ginsburg episode, she happened to pass away, and it wanted us to talk about the legacy she left behind, and kind of made us create this, like, okay, let's address this, because she's not the first one that created this visual legacy for us, but it's something that we can address from a visual perspective, because we're not political activists here, but there's a visual aspect to what she created with the descent necklace and the collar and all of that stuff. But that happened because it happened in time. And to be able to wing it towards that is kind of what the flexibility of it is. And to be able to talk about that, there was the episode where we had no inclination of being political, and then we walked out for coffee before recording and found out the Breonna Taylor, the verdict that came out, the decision that came out, and that was very disappointing. And so, I mean, I think it makes us more human, other than these, like, timeless things that we can talk about, creatives and non-creatives in a business engagement. But it is also important. This is a podcast. This is not an information show. This is not... It's not a news show. It's not a news show. This is not an educational video. This is about you and me, who we are, and how we carry through this life, trying to lead a productive and creative life. So I think that check-in, as much as I dread it every time I'm coming into the office, that I'm like, well, I'm going to have to talk about what I wear now, and I don't like what I want to wear. But it's more
about what you're wearing. It's how you're feeling.
Yes.
The literal question is how you're feeling and what are you wearing.
Don't let me go down that rabbit hole of post-quarantine. I don't feel good in what I'm wearing.
Okay.
So, in general, like, I'm like, well, but then I'm going to have to talk about it now. So... it has also pulled me out of this, like, we never leave our apartments. So when I leave, doesn't matter what I put on is no longer a thing, because now I'm going to go talk about it and we're going to put it on a podcast. So what I wear matters. It kind of pulls you together in terms of, okay, I'm going on to society and no longer in my apartment with my dog alone, right? Like, it as much as I dread it, it is, and it has a positive impact in generally how I live my life when I'm on my way to record, which is a good thing.
Thank you for hanging with us. For a list of resources mentioned in this week's episode, hop onto our site, GATSBYFRIDAYS.com.
You can find the Gatsby Negroni recipe on the website, GATSBYFRIDAYS.com.
For show notes, or if you want to leave a comment or suggest show topics, get at us on our site.
Don't forget to rate us, give us 5 stars, and write a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us to get in front of more ears and build our audience. Or if you're a Spotify person, make sure you follow Gatsby Fridays.
Follow us on Instagram for exclusive content like Sarah making this week's drink on our Insta stories and throughout the week.
Stay with us on our next episode. We talk about Design Book Club.
This is Gatsby Fridays. Thank you for hanging with us. For a list of resources mentioned in this week's episode, hop onto our site, GATSBYFRIDAYS.com.
You can find the Gatsby Negroni recipe on the website, GATSBYFRIDAYS.com.
For show notes, or if you want to leave a comment or suggest show topics, get at us on our site.
Don't forget to rate us, give us 5 stars, and write a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us to get in front of more ears and build our audience. Or if you're a Spotify person, make sure you follow Gatsby Fridays.
Follow us on Instagram for exclusive content like Sarah making this week's drink on our Insta stories and throughout the week.
Stay with us on our next episode. We talk about Design Book Club.
This is Gatsby Fridays.